Okay, let's have an example, a simple example. First, I'm using a CodeBlocks program, IDE, locally installed IDE. You can download CodeBlocks. I'm using 20.03 version. So going back on our program example, I will document my program by using a comment, right? Simple data input output program. So the first line is just a comment. So there are ways how to use a comment by using slash asterisk slash, or by using the double slash. Okay, same lang na siya, it's a comment. So all programs must have the preprocessor directory. So the basic one, the standard input output header file. Tell the compiler to include standard input output headers in our program, because there are functions that we will use that contains these functions. Okay, like printf. So next, you can have a blank space, or you can start immediately. So that depends on you. But some, they put a blank space first before the function main to make it look readable, So int main void. The reason again why we put void is that we will not put return 0. If we put return 0, then we will not put void here. Okay, if we put void, there's no need for you to put return 0. Voids means to say it returns 0 or it returns nothing. Okay, what is next? Because we're using variables in these examples, because we have input and output, we have what we call variable declaration. All variables must be defined with a name and data type before they can be used in a program. So we will now declare a variable. So to define a variable, there must be a data type. Our data type is int. Then let's try to create a variable. Variable num1. This will hold the value. So before moving on to our program, which is it will ask the user for a number, then just display the output afterwards. Before going into that, let's have a demonstration why variables hold data. It holds an integer value in this example. So next, let's try to have this printf. Printf, again, f is formatted. It prints whatever is inside the message, or inside this double quotes. Okay, don't forget the terminator. For example, let's say the value of num1 is person d. Now num1. Okay, let's try to make it this one as num, short for number. So in naming variables, should be, it's like meaningful. So like for example num, because you're asking for a number. Now you might ask, now what is this %d? %d stands for decimal. So this is the format specifier for integer. So the format specifier for integer is d, means decimal number. Okay, so others, they're using I for integer, but the most common one is using %d. So it prints whatever is the value of num will be printed. So the output is the value of num, whatever is the output of whatever is the value of num will be printed. So like example, let's have an example first. Let's try to put equals equal sign is called the assignment operator. The assignment operator, it assigned num5 to num. So means you put value 5 into num. So it points now the value of num is %d, which is the value of num. Num is 5, it will print the value of num. So let's check. Let's try to build, then build and run. There you go. The value of num is 5. So the variables hold data. Let's have an example. We put 10. 10. Let's try to run. Sorry, this is the old one. Let's try to build and run. The value of num is 10. So, as to say, the variable num holds data in which that data is integer, and integer, by the way, is integers are whole numbers that can have both 0, positive, and negative values, but no decimal values. Always remember that there are no decimal values. So example of integer is 0, -5, 10, 20, and so on, as long as it is a whole number, no decimal. Okay, let's try to put an example. -5, -13 example. So we try to run, build and run. So the value of num is -13. So 13 is an integer. So what if we put a decimal value, 2.138? What will be the output? So the output is 2, because we try to define variable num as integer, so it only accepts whole numbers. So what if we have decimal values? So let's continue na lang discussing other data types for moving on sa ating example. So to those with decimal places, we have another data type. It's either we use float, which float means floating point numbers. The float is used for numbers with decimal places. So what about the format specifier? If we're using float, we use also %f. Okay? So that when we run the program, try to build and run, the value of num is 2.38, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decimal places. Alright, for example, our example is only 2.38, but again there are other places nga 6 other places with zeros. We can also put a format. For example, what if 2 decimal places lang? So we'll change here atong %f as 0.2. Means to say only 2 decimal places, 0.2, or you can use only 0.2f. Means to say there are 2 decimal places. Try to run this one. When we run our program, there are no more zeros. It's only 2.38. What if 1 decimal place only? So we use 0.1. Let's try to check the output. So we have 2.4. Okay, so say usa na lang siya. It converts 2.38 is equivalent to 2.4 into 1 decimal place only. There's another one, double, because float is only 6 decimal places. More than 6, we will use another one which is called double. Okay. Now what about characters? For example, you say what about letter C? We will use car or a character. Let's say car. Character means then we put this one should be inside the single quotes. Example, letter A. Print letter A. Say then we use percent. The format specifier or conversion specifier for character is percent C. Sorry, percent C. Right. So for car, the format specifier or conversion specifier is percent C. When you run this one, when you execute the program, the value of num is A. Okay, say capital letter J. Character is a single character. It cannot accommodate more than one character because that could be a string, but string is part of arrays, so we will discuss that one when we reach arrays, or after arrays we'll discuss strings. Okay, character num J, we initialize num with the value J. So let's try to check what's the output. So the value of num is J. So you just learned different types of data types: integer, num, and float and double. Okay, so we'll just go back to our original objective, this program, that a simple data input and output. Okay, I hope you learned different data types as of this moment. All right. Okay, let's now proceed with our example. So we have int num, try to define integer num. We have here printf. Here, this is what we call a prompt. It prompts the user to perform an action. And what is that action? This action is the next one, using scanf. Scanf, there are two parts of the scanf. The specifier, or the conversion specifier. So we try to declare a variable here with integer data type. So we're using %d. Then it will be stored to the variable num, but this time there is an ampersand. Okay, here we have what we call scanf. Scanf, so we have here two functions, printf and scanf. Printf will just print whatever is inside its literal or message. Scanf is what? Scanf tells the user, it will ask the user for input. That input should be integer. That right after the moment you press enter, it will go to variable num. Then what is this ampersand? This ampersand is the address to where that variable is stored in the memory. Okay, that is very important. Why important? Let's try to have an example, a demonstration. Say printf, let's try, the your input number is, it's just an example of, you try to input a number, then you try to display whatever is the input number. Right? So enter number. So the program goes like this. First, it will print on the screen enter number. Then it pauses because it waits for a user input. The scanf tells the user to input a number, and that number should be an integer. That integer, after you press enter, it will be stored to the variable num. Then afterwards, it will print your input number is %d. Whatever is the value of the variable num will be printed. Alright, let's try to have an example. Let's try to test our code. Okay, enter number. Let's say input 25. So input 25, your input number is 25. So it just prints out whatever is your input. Let's have another example. Enter number 39. So it just prints your input number is 39. I mentioned about the importance of this ampersand. The ampersand tells the computer, the compiler, where it stores the variable num in the memory. It's the address of the num. Now, if you try to remove ampersand, now the computer, when you execute the program, it cannot find where is that variable, the value of that variable. It cannot find the value of that variable because it cannot find where that variable num is located inside the memory. Let's try to check. Example 44. Process return, wala, it cannot return the value of 44 because it doesn't know where that variable is being stored in the memory because we did not put ampersand. That is the importance of putting an ampersand before the variable in scanf. So in scanf, first is the format control string or the conversion specifier, wherein the input number should be an integer. After you press enter, it will be stored in the variable num. Then afterwards, our program is just printf, your input number is whatever is the value of num. It should be an integer. It's converted into an integer. Okay, one last demonstration. So, enter number. It is now blinking. The cursor is blinking because we are now on scanf. So it prompts the user to input a value. So this is now the scanf part. Whatever is our input, for example, 89, whatever is our input, when we press enter, will go to the variable num. Then afterwards, it just prints on the value of num. Your input number is 89. So this is just a demonstration on simple input and simple output. I hope you learned something in this demonstration. Next,